The door closed behind me with a sound colder than the snow. I was 70 years old, and for the first time in my whole long life, I had nowhere to go. I stood on that porch a long moment, just listening. The lock turned on the other side, a small click, such a small sound to mean so much. And then the porch light went dark too, like even the light wanted nothing more to do with us. Beside me, a boy of 10 held my hand. His fingers were already cold. He looked up at me, and his breath came out in little white clouds, and he asked me the question I will hear in my dreams until the day they put me in the ground. "Grandma, are we going to die out here?" I looked down at him, at Theo, at his thin jacket, the one with the zipper that never quite caught, at his sneakers, already so clean through, at his face. He had his father's eyes, my son's eyes, looking up at me the way my boy used to look up at me a whole lifetime ago when the world was still soft and full of people I loved. And I made him a promise. "As long as I am breathing," I said, "no. We are going to find a place the wind can't reach. You hear me? I promise you that." I did not know yet if it was a lie. Behind that locked door was my cousin Carla, and her husband, Dale, warm in a house that smelled of pot roast and wood smoke and a fire someone else got to sit beside. 2 hours before, they had set our bags out on that porch without a single word. No goodbye. No, I'm sorry. Just our whole lives in a canvas duffel and a little boy's backpack, set down in the snow like trash put out for the morning truck. I want you to understand something before we go one step further. They did not put us out because there wasn't room. There was plenty of room. They put us out because I had said one small word to them. I had said no. But I'll come to that. A story has to be told in its order. That's how my mother told them. That's how her mother told them, and hers before that. You walk into a story the same way Theo and I walked into those mountains that night. One step, then another, and you don't look too far ahead because if you do, the size of it will stop your heart. The town was called Cedar Hollow, a small place tucked up into the eastern slope of the Colorado Rockies, the kind of town with one stoplight that blinks yellow after 9, a feed store, a diner where the coffee never stops coming and everybody knows whose marriage is in trouble, a church with a white steeple and a graveyard out back under an old oak, a few thousand souls, most of whom had known me once, a long time ago, before I left. I had not wanted to come back. Lord knows I hadn't. But 2 years gone, my son died, and the courts handed me his boy, and I had nowhere else on God's earth to take him. Carla was family. Family takes you in. That is what I believed, all the way down to the bottom of myself. I was a fool to believe it. We walked out past the last streetlight in town, Theo and me, and the houses fell away behind us, their windows yellow and warm and shut, and the dark came down off the mountains like a tide coming in. The wind followed us up through the trees. I leaned on a walking stick I'd cut from a fallen branch, and Theo dragged his tired feet through the wet leaves beside me, and for the longest time, neither one of us said a word. He kept looking back. Every few steps, I watched him do it. He was hoping, I think, that a door would open behind us, and yellow light would spill out, and somebody would call us home. Nobody did. The clouds slid over the peaks and swallowed up the last gray light of the evening, and the deeper we walked, the colder the air became. I could feel it getting into my chest, a tightness there, a small, mean warning that I chose not to listen to. Not then. I had enough to carry without carrying that too. "Grandma," Theo finally whispered, "where are we going?" And I did not answer him right away, because here's the thing I had not yet told my grandson. I knew these mountains. I knew them better than I knew the lines on the backs of my own hands. I had grown up on this very slope. I was born within sight of these peaks. As a girl, I ran wild through these woods with the deer and the foxes, and my father taught me everything his father had taught him, and his father before that. Which root you can eat, and which one will put you in the ground. How to read the sky. How to keep a body alive when the cold wants it dead. We were not lost. Not for one single step. I had walked us out into that wilderness on purpose. That was the first thing the night was going to teach my grandson, that an old woman pushed out into the snow with nothing but a backpack is not always near so helpless as she looks. Somewhere the wind can't follow us, I told him. Trust me. And to my surprise, that child did. He squeezed my hand a little tighter, and he stopped looking back. We climbed. The trees began to thin out the higher we went, the way they always do up here, until it was mostly rock and scrub and the pale ghost shapes of boulders standing in the dark. Theo's hands were trembling now. Bad. I could hear his teeth knocking together, and I knew, in the cold, practical part of me that has kept me alive 70 years, that we did not have much time left. The body keeps a clock when the cold gets into it, and that clock was already running down toward the place where it stops. Then I stopped walking, because there it was, between two enormous boulders, half hidden under a curtain of hanging moss and a tangle of dead branches. There was a crack in the stone. I nearly wept right there in the snow, because I remembered it. 60 years gone from this mountain, and my body remembered this place before my mind even caught up. My feet had brought me here, the way a horse finds water. It looked too narrow for a person, at the first glance, but I reached up and I pushed that dead branch aside, the way my father had shown me a lifetime ago, and I stepped in close, and I saw that the crack opened back into a deep hollow inside the mountain itself, dry, out of the wind. A fold in the stone, like the mountain had cupped its great hand against the storm and left a hollow space inside the palm. "Is this a cave?" Theo asked me. His voice was so small. "No," I said. "It's better than a cave. A cave can flood on you. A cave can trap the cold and hold it down around you all night long. This is a fracture. The stone breathes. Feel that?" I held my hand up near the opening. Air moves through it. "That's good. That's life. Right there." I ran my palm along the rock above the opening. Slow, careful. I felt for the loose pieces, for the hairline cracks that tell you a roof might come down on your head while you sleep. My father's voice was in my hands while I did it. I could hear him plain as day. "Always check what's over your head, Nellie, before you trust what's under your feet." After a long moment, I nodded to myself. "It'll hold," I said. And there, right there. For the first time in that whole terrible night, I saw a little spark of hope come up into my grandson's eyes. Lord, that spark. I would have walked into 100 snowstorms for that little spark of hope. Inside, the stone hollow was dry, but it was cold. A deep, old, patient cold. The kind that lives down inside the rock itself and just waits. Waits for something warm to come along. And Theo did exactly what any tired, frightened child would do. He went straight to the wall, and he sat himself down against it, ready to just give up and sleep. I caught his arm. Quick. Harder than I meant to. "No," I said. "Never. Never sleep on the bare ground. Not ever in your life. You hear me, Theo?" He looked up at me, confused. A little hurt, even. He'd done nothing wrong, and here I was barking at him. So I softened. I lowered myself down beside him, my old knees complaining the whole long way to the floor. "The earth steals your heat faster than the air does, sweetheart," I told him. "Gentle now. You sit on that cold stone 1 hour and your body starts losing the fight without you even knowing it's happening. The ground'll kill you slow and polite. While you sleep, dreaming of someplace warm, we don't ever give it the chance. All right? That's rule 1. That's rule 1, he repeated. Solemn. That's rule 1. So while there was still a scrap of gray light left in the world, the two of us went to work. We went back out into the cold together, and we gathered up everything that forest floor would give us. Dry leaves, long strips of bark off the dead trees, old gray moss hanging down off the fallen branches, pine needles, dead and brown and dry. We carried it all back inside, armful after armful, my 2 old arms and his 2 little ones, trip after trip after trip, and I showed him how to build a bed up off that cold ground, a thick layer, deep as my hand is long, packed across the whole floor of that stone hollow. The first armful it looked like nothing at all, looked hopeless. The 10th armful started to look like something. And by the time the dark came down full and black outside, the bare, cold killing stone had completely disappeared under a rough, deep mattress of forest. It was not comfort. I won't sit here and tell you it was comfort. But it was the difference between a body that lives through the night and a body that doesn't. And I watched Theo's hands while we worked. At the start, they shook so bad he could barely hold a fistful of leaves together. By the last trip out, they shook a little less. The work itself was warming him from the inside. That was the lesson, though he didn't know yet that he was learning it. The cold wants you to lie down and be still, and you beat it by getting up and moving. Now, before I tell you what we did next, I want to stop for just a moment, just you and me. Because if you have ever in your life had a door close on you, locked, by the very people who were supposed to love you and keep you, then I want you to know that I see you. I do. I have been on that porch. If that's you, watching this tonight, would you do me one small kindness? Leave a little heart down in the comments below, just so I know I'm not telling this story to an empty room. So I know you're out there by your own fire. We'll keep right on going in just a second. But I wanted to say that to you first. All right. Now, the fire. The dark outside had become nearly complete. The only sound left in the whole world was that wind moving through the trees far below us now. It was an animal sound, low and searching, like something hunting for a way in. I knelt down near the mouth of the hollow, and I built up a small, careful pile of the driest twigs I could find. And then I did a thing my grandson did not understand. I gathered up a handful of flat rocks, and I set them up in a little wall behind the twig pile. "Why are you putting the stones there?" he asked me. "So the heat stays with us," I said. "A fire out in the open, it gives away all its warmth to the sky. Just throws it up and away, free for nothing. Selfish thing, an open fire. But these stones here, they catch that heat and they hold it and they throw it right back at us all night long. The mountain wants to steal our fire from us, Theo. We just don't let it." I had an old lighter down in my coat pocket, the kind you carry for 30 years and never once think about, until it's the only thing standing between you and the dark. I struck it once. Nothing. I struck it again. Just a spark. A little cough of light, and then gone. And I felt Theo go very still beside me. I felt the fear coming off that child like heat off a stove. And I will tell you, I have never in all my 70 years wanted a thing to work the way I wanted that old lighter to work. My whole body was bent into one single prayer. I struck it a third time, and a tiny flame caught down in the dry moss. Slow at first, shy, almost, and then it spread, finger by finger, into the twigs, and the twigs caught, and the little fire began, soft and low, to breathe. Orange light bloomed out across the stone walls. It pushed the dark back into the far corners where it belonged. It threw our two shadows up huge and trembling against the rock. And my grandson let out a long breath I think he'd been holding for an hour. And he reached his cold little hands out toward that flame, and the firelight caught and danced down in his eyes. And just like that cold crack in the mountain stopped feeling like a grave, and it started, for the first time, to feel like shelter. When the fire was steady, I reached over and opened the old duffel bag, and I took a good honest look at everything we had in this world. It was not much. I'll be honest with you. I've been honest with you this far, and I'm not going to stop now. There was a heel of bread, already going hard at the edges. 2 crackers, crushed up small, still in their paper wrapper. A dented old metal cup, black on the bottom from 100 campfires I thought I'd left behind me forever. A little pocket knife, a coil of old rope, a few odds and ends a person keeps. And that was it. That was everything the two of us owned in the whole wide world. Theo looked at that bread, and then I watched my grandson make a decision. I watched him decide not to look hungry, 10 years old, and already he was trying to protect me from the size of his own need. That child. That good child. It's a thing that can break you wide open, the goodness of a child who's been given every reason to be otherwise. So I broke the bread in half, and then I took the smaller half for myself, and I put the bigger half in his hands. He started to argue with me. I gave him a look. He stopped. There was water trickling down through the rock at the back of the hollow. Snowmelt, finding its slow way down through the whole mountain. I took up that dented metal cup and I held it under the thin little stream until it filled. Now, Water that comes through the rock like this is cleaner, I told him. The stone strains it on the way down, but you never trust it cold. Cold mountain water can carry things in it that'll lay a grown man flat for a week, so we warm it first. Always. I set the cup down close beside the flames until little bubbles started climbing up the inside, and then I handed it to him, and Theo wrapped both his hands around that warm metal, and for a few minutes the two of us just sat there together in the firelight, and we ate, slow, careful, like every single crumb was worth more than gold. That night, it was. But the wind, out there, had other plans for us. It got stronger as the hours wore down toward midnight. It came howling up through the mountain pass like a living thing, and every few minutes a knife of cold air would find its way through a gap in the stone and steal the warmth right out of our hands and out of the fire. I watched our little fire flinch back every time it happened. I watched the wide mouth of the hollow where the dark and the cold came pouring in, and I knew we were not finished yet. We're still too open in here, I said, and I pushed myself up onto my feet, my old bones screaming at me the whole way up. Come on now, one more job, and then we sleep, I promise. Theo groaned. He was so tired, so bone-tired, but he got up. He always got up. In all the days that came after, that boy never told me once that he couldn't. We went back out into that freezing dark together, the two of us, and we carried loose rocks toward the mouth of the shelter, one at a time. Some were so heavy I had to drag them through the snow with both hands, and some Theo pushed with both his arms and the whole weight of his little body, his face all screwed up with the effort of it, and little by little, stone by stone, we made that wide-open mouth grow narrow. We left just enough room for a person to slip through sideways, and just enough up high for the smoke to find its way out. Then we gathered up fallen branches and dead brush and great armfuls of dry grass, and I showed my grandson how to weave those branches in and out between the stones, not to block the wind out completely. You never block it all the way out, or you'll smother yourself dead on your own smoke before morning. You weave it just so that you get to decide what comes in. Shelter isn't walls, Theo, I told him, my breath coming ragged in the cold. Any fool alive can stack up a wall. Shelter is control. You decide what comes in, and you decide what stays out. That's the whole secret of it. That's the only secret there ever is, to shelter, and to just about everything else, too, if you live long enough to learn it. He nodded at me, serious as a country judge, and he copied every single thing I did with those branches. Then we packed the smaller cracks tight with mud and moss and grass, sealing out the worst of those cold drafts that came creeping through. And here is the funny thing about it. That work warmed us better than the fire ever had. By the time we were finished and we stood back, the both of us were breathing hard, and we were almost warm. I stepped back, and I looked at the thing we had built together. An hour before, it had been nothing in the world but a cold, dead split in the rock. And now the firelight danced soft and gold across the walls, and the wind sounded a long way off, and it was ours. We had made it ours. Theo looked at it too, and then he said a thing that broke my old heart clean in half. It almost feels like a real home, he whispered, and I looked at that narrow stone shelter for a long, long while before I gave him my answer. I thought about the locked door down in the valley. I thought about pot roast and wood smoke and family that turned out not to be family at all. No, I said to him, soft. A home is a place where people give up on you. A fortress is a place where you learn to survive without them. He didn't fully understand it. Not that night, how could he? He was 10 years old, but he would understand it. In time, he would understand every word of it. The fire had burned down low, just a dim orange glow filling up the hollow, when my grandson finally asked me the question I had been dreading all night long. Grandma, why did Carla and Dale make us leave? What did we do? I fed a little stick into the flames. I watched it catch and curl, and I decided that he was old enough now to know the truth of it. We didn't do a thing, baby, I said. Not one thing wrong. It's about land. There's a piece of land up in these mountains. It's been in our family a long, long time. Longer than that town down there has even had a name. It came down through the years, and now belongs to me. And Carla and her husband, they've gotten themselves into a deep hole with money, and they wanted me to sign that land over to them, sell it off, pay their debts with the one thing in this world that was never theirs to spend. And you said no, he said. And I said no. He thought about that a while. The fire popped and settled. Is that why they're so mad at us? That's the whole why, I said. You learn this young, Theo, and maybe it'll save you some heartache I never got saved from. When you've got nothing left to bargain with, people show you real fast just how little they ever cared. They threw us out into the cold to break me, to scare me. They figure one cold night, maybe two, and this old woman will come crawling back down that mountain and sign whatever paper they push across the table at her. Will you? He asked me, real quiet. Will you sign it if it means we get to be warm again? And I looked at my grandson there in the firelight, at those eyes, my son's eyes looking back at me out of that small, tired face. Theo, I said, listen to me now. I have lost just about everything a person can lose in one life. I lost your grandfather years back. I lost your daddy, my own boy, and there's no pain like that one, and I pray you never know it. I lost nearly every single person I ever loved in this world. But I'm going to tell you what I have not lost and what I will not lose. Not for any house, not for all the warm nights left in the world. I have not lost myself. I still know who I am, and so do you. You're a Brennan, and neither one of us is going to forget it, not while there's breath in me. He was quiet for a long time after that, and then he scooted himself over, and he laid his head down against my arm, and I felt the warm weight of him there, and the soft rise and fall of his breathing as he finally let go and fell asleep against me. And as I sat there feeding little sticks into that fire one at a time, making them last, listening to the wind try every crack in our wall and fail and fail and fail again, I heard something else. Something underneath the wind. It came from the back of the hollow, from that deep black dark behind us, where the stone folded itself into shadow and I had not yet gone to look. A sound like air, moving, slow, in and out, like the mountain itself was breathing, deep and even, in its sleep. I held very still, and I listened, and there it came again. A long, slow draw of air, in and then out, coming from somewhere far back inside the rock. I had grown up on this mountain. I knew every story it kept, and one of those old stories, one I had not thought about in 50 years, came rising back up to me there in the dark. I looked at that black mouth of stone at the back of our little shelter, and I whispered to my sleeping grandson, though he could not hear a word of it. Tomorrow, I said, tomorrow, you and me, we go deeper. Morning came thin and gray, the light leaking in soft through the branches we'd woven across the door. I had not really slept. An old woman with a heart like mine doesn't get much sleep in the cold, but Theo had slept like the dead, warm and safe under that bed of leaves. And when he woke and saw the daylight, and saw me sitting there alive beside him, and understood that he was not, in fact, frozen dead in a snowbank somewhere, the pure relief that came over his face was a thing I will carry to my grave. We made it, he said. There was wonder in it. We made it, I told him. Night one. Now comes the hard part. He blinked at me. That wasn't the hard part? I nearly laughed out loud. Surviving one night? Anybody can do that, with a little luck and a dry match. But living up here, eating up here, day after day, that takes knowing things. And lucky for you, child, knowing things is the one thing I've got plenty of. I fed the fire back up from its sleeping coals. I melted snow down in the cup and warmed it, and we passed it back and forth between us and drank. And then I reached over and took up that coil of old rope and the little pocket knife, and I began to teach my grandson how to stay alive in this world. I showed him how to separate that rope down into thinner strands, how to bend a length of wire from the bottom of the duffel into a snare that would hold, how to read the forest floor for the little highways that the animals make. Rabbits are creatures of habit, I told him. Same as people. They run the same trail over and over till they wear it into the ground. You don't go chasing a rabbit, Theo. You'll never catch one that way, and you'll freeze trying. You learn where he's already going, and then you just wait for him there. I showed him how to dig down for the pale, soft roots that grow near the snowmelt streams. Which ones will feed you, and which ones look just exactly the same and will put you down in the cold ground forever. The mountain gives, I told him, but the mountain never makes it easy. It wants to know that you're paying attention. It wants to know you respect it. And he soaked up every word. He was hungry to learn it, the way only a child who has been truly afraid can be hungry. By the middle of the morning, he'd set his very first snare all on his own, and the pride that came up in his face when I looked it over and told him it was a good one, a real good one. Well, there are not many things left in this old world that can make an old woman's eyes sting. That was one of them. But all that long morning, I kept finding my eyes drawn back to the rear of the hollow, to that fold of dark where the cold stone breathed. And finally, when the snares were all set and the fire was banked down safe, I reached into the coals and I lifted out a burning brand, and I said, "All right, come on now. There's one more thing in this mountain we need to go and look at." The crack at the back of our shelter was narrow. I had to turn myself sideways and breathe all the way out just to fit through it, and my old shoulders dragged hard against the cold stone. Theo slipped through easy, the way only a child can. And then, on the other side, the passage opened up. I lifted that torch high, and the breath just stopped in my chest. Because it was not a cave. It was not a natural fold in the rock at all. It was a tunnel, cut by human hands. The walls were squared off, rough but deliberate. The marks of old tools were still right there in the stone, where some man had swung a pick 100 years before I was ever born. There were timber posts, gone gray and dry, and hard as iron with the age of them, holding up the ceiling here and there. The floor was packed flat and smooth by feet that had walked it long, long ago, and the air moved through the whole length of it, that slow, patient breathing I'd heard in the night, drawing up from somewhere deep and going out somewhere high above. Amine. An old, long-abandoned mine, hidden away behind the very rock where the two of us had taken shelter by what surely looked like nothing but blind, dumb chance. But it was not chance. I knew it, even standing there. Down in my bones, I knew it was never chance at all. "Grandma," Theo whispered, and his small voice went bouncing off the cold stone walls. "What is this place?" I walked forward, slow, holding that torch up high, and I found the thing that, in my deepest heart, I think I already knew that I would find there, carved deep into the rock wall, worn down soft by 100 years of that breathing air, but still clear, still plain to read. A name, Brennan, my name, our name, Theo's name, and carved underneath it, a date from more than 100 years gone by. I put my hand flat against those letters, and I felt the cold of the stone, and underneath the cold, I swear to you, I felt the whole long line of them. My grandfather's grandfather had cut that name, with his own 2 hands. The land up in these mountains that Carla wanted so bad, the land I would not sign away no matter what it cost us. This was the heart of it, right here, not just acres of timber and rock on a county map. This. A whole family's history, cut down into a living mountain by hands that carried the very same blood that was running, slow and tired, through me. "This is ours," I told my grandson, and my voice broke right in the middle of it. "This is the thing they wanted me to sign away for their debts, and we've been sitting right on top of it the whole night long. Our own family's land. Our own people's hands made this place, Theo, long before either one of us was a thought in anybody's mind." He stared at that carved name like it was a face, like he was looking at a face. "That's my name," he said. "That's your name," I said. "You come from people who carved their own lives down into solid rock with their bare hands, Theo Brennan. You remember that. Whatever happens to us, whatever comes, you come from that. You come from people who lasted. We did not go far that first time. The air went bad the deeper in you walked. I could feel it, and I have always kept a healthy respect for old timbers and old dark. So we turned back to the fire. But something had shifted in the both of us. We were not 2 castaways hiding in a hole in the ground anymore. We were home, standing on land that knew our name. That should have been the very best moment of those long, terrible days. And maybe, in some ways, it was. But it is not the moment I think about the most, because that same afternoon everything changed on us again. I had gone back into the tunnel by myself, just a little way, to see if the old miners had left anything behind worth the having. Men like that always left things: tools, a lantern. And I was running my torch along a side passage when the light caught on something that did not belong. A boot print in the soft dust of the floor. Fresh, not mine, and not Theo's. It was a grown man's boot, bigger than mine, the tread still sharp and clear in the dust. I went very still, the way you go still when the ground itself shifts under your feet. And then a voice came out of the dark behind me, low and rough and bone-tired. "You're standing on my fire." I turned around, slow, and I held that torch up high. A man stood there in the mouth of the side passage. 35 maybe, no more. Lean and worn right down to the bone of himself. A beard gone wild and untended. A coat that had seen too many hard winters and lost every one of them. There was a small dead fire ring at his feet, a bedroll, and the few sad belongings of a person who lives nowhere at all. I'll tell you the truth. My first feeling was fear, a pure, cold animal fear. I am 70 years old, and I had that child in my care, and here was a strange man living in the dark heart of my family's own mountain. But I have learned a few things in 70 years of living, and one of the truest of them is this: a dangerous man postures. He makes himself big. He fills up the doorway. This man had not moved an inch. He'd spoken soft, and he looked, more than anything else in this world, ashamed. "Who are you?" I asked him, and I made good and sure my voice did not shake. "Name's Reuben," he said. "Folks used to call me Rue, back before they mostly stopped calling me anything at all." A pause. "I'm not going to hurt you, ma'am. I haven't got it left in me. I swear that to you. I just needed someplace out of the wind, same as anybody." "You and me both," I said, and we just stood there a moment, the two of us, in the breathing dark, two people that the world had set out on the porch in the snow. I won't pretend it was simple after that. Trust is not a lamp you just reach over and switch on. For the rest of that day, Rue kept his distance, and I kept mine, and Theo watched the man with the wary, sideways eyes of a child who has already learned, far too young, that grown people break their promises. But when the evening came on, and the cold started dropping like a stone down a well, I let Rue come up to the mouth of our fire, because I am not a woman who can leave another soul out in the freezing dark to die, whatever my fear had to say about it. And over that fire he told us a little of his story. He'd had a wife once, and a daughter, a little house with a yard and a swing set in it, and then a long stretch of bad luck and worse choices on top of it, and a bottle that took it all, slow and then fast. And one gray morning he woke up and they were gone, every one of them, and so was the house, and so was the man he used to be. He'd been walking the country ever since, working when somebody'd have him, hiding when they wouldn't. "I had a home," he said, staring down into the flames. "I just never once knew what I had, not till the day it was already gone." And I looked over at Theo when he said that, and Theo looked back at me, and I thought to myself, well, there it is, the very same lesson, come at us now from the other side of the road. We had lost our home and gone and found ourselves a fortress, and this poor broken man had been handed a home and lost it, because he never once built the thing inside himself that holds a home together when the wind comes. But I want to stop right here, just for a minute, because we are coming up now to the very heart of the whole thing, and I want to ask you something before we go on. That night, deeper in that tunnel, my grandson was about to find something, a box his own father had hidden away in the dark years before with his own two hands. And I have wondered about this ever since, and I want to ask it of you now. If you found a letter from someone you had lost, someone gone 2 years into the ground, someone you never once got the chance to say a proper goodbye to, would you read it right then and there, or would you be afraid of it? Would you hold it in your hands a while, unopened, and let it stay a question just a little longer, because a question still has some hope folded up inside it. I'd truly love to know. Tell me down in the comments below. I mean that. I read them. And if this story has gotten its hooks into your heart tonight, would you tap on that subscribe button down there for me so this story can go and find other folks like you, people who understand exactly what it is I'm talking about. Now, let me tell you what my Theo found in the dark. It was Theo who found it. Of course it was. It's always the children who see the thing that we walk right on past. He'd been poking around the squared-off walls of the main tunnel, running his fingers along the cracks, checking for the loose stone the way I had taught him to. When one stone turned out to be no wall stone at all, it was set in there loose, on purpose, and behind it, tucked back into a little hollow in the rock, was a tin box. An old child's lunch tin, rusted soft at all the corners, tied shut with a knotted bootlace. "Grandma," he said, and something in the way he said it brought me straight up off that fire. "There's writing on it." I took it from him over to the light, and there, scratched down into the lid of that old tin, with the point of a knife, in a handwriting that I would have known anywhere, in any light. On the far side of death itself, there were 3 words. For my son, my boy's handwriting, my son, Theo's father. My knees just went out from under me. I sat right down on that cold stone floor and I did not even feel it, because all at once I understood the whole shape of the thing. My son had known this place. Of course he had known it. I'd brought him up here myself when he was a boy no bigger than Theo, the same way my own father had carried me. And at some point in his short life, my boy had come back to this mountain all alone, and he had hidden this box away in the dark for his own son to find one day. He had known about the land. He had loved this place with his whole heart, and he had left something here in the breathing dark on purpose and trusted the mountain to keep it safe until the day his boy needed it most. He could not have known how soon that day was coming. I untied that old bootlace with hands that would not hold still, and inside the tin there were photographs, old ones, soft at the edges. My son as a fat, laughing baby, held up in my own young arms, the both of us caught laughing at something nobody will ever remember now. My son, grown, holding Theo as a brand new baby, his whole face cracked wide open with a joy I had never once seen on it before nor since, and a picture of the 3 of us together that I did not even remember being taken. And down underneath all the photographs, folded up small, there was a letter. I almost could not make myself hand it over. God forgive me, I almost kept it for my own, but it was not mine to keep. It said so, right there on the lid, for my son. And so I put that letter into my grandson's hands, and I held the torch up steady for him. And I watched a 10-year-old boy read the very last words his father ever left behind in this world for him. I won't give you the whole of that letter. Some things are too holy to go repeating out loud by a campfire, but I will give you the one line, the line that broke us both clean in 2, the line that Theo read out loud, in a small, shaking voice, in the breathing dark of that old mine. If you're reading this, my son had written to his boy, then you found the place I told you about, and that means you're a Brennan, all the way through. So wherever you are right now, whatever's happened to get you there, you were always loved. You hear me? Always. From before you were even born, and long after I'm gone, there was never one single second of your life that you were not loved. And Theo's shoulders started to shake, and then he was crying, the deep, heaving cry of a child who has been holding far too much for far too long all by himself. And I pulled my grandson into my arms, and I held him hard against my chest in the firelight, and I cried right along with him, the 2 of us, in the heart of a mountain that knew our name, holding on with everything we had to the last words of the man we had both of us loved and lost. And Rue, over by the fire, he took the hat off his head and he looked down at the ground and he let us be. That should have been the end of the hard part. It was only the very beginning of it, because the deep cold that had been gathering itself all that day finally broke loose on us in the night, and it came down on the mountain like the wrath of God himself. A blizzard. I had seen storms on this mountain as a girl, but I had let myself forget. The wind didn't howl anymore. It screamed. Snow drove sideways in through every gap in our wall and hissed where it hit the fire. The cold fell and kept on falling. And the fire, our whole lives, it began to gutter and shrink some more. Wood, I said. We need more wood. Now, before this thing dies on us. But our woodpile was outside, and outside was a white, roaring, screaming nothing, and there, right there, I made the one mistake that I will answer to God for. I went out into it myself. The stubborn old woman that I am. I would not send the child, and I would not send the stranger, so I went. I dragged an armful of branches in out of the storm, and on my way back through that screaming, killing cold, the thing that had been waiting in my chest for years finally decided that its time had come. A fist closed itself around my heart. I have a bad heart. I have carried it for years now, and I never told Theo. I never told a living soul. It's an old woman's secret, the kind you carry alone, because the last thing on this earth you want to be is a burden to the one child you've got left. And out there in that storm, with the cold squeezing the life out of me, my heart finally said, that's enough now, no more. The pain went shooting down my left arm and up into my jaw, and I could not pull in a breath to save my life. And the whole white world tilted hard, and the snow went black around the edges. I got back inside. I do not to this day know how. I got myself through that gap in the wall, and I went straight down onto the leaves beside the fire, and I could not speak, and I could not move. And the last thing I saw, before the dark came up and took me down, was my grandson's face, terrified, white as the snow, shouting words at me that I could no longer hear. And here is the thing. Here is the whole reason for everything I had done. Every lesson, every hard word, every cold trip out for one more armful of leaves. Because in that one moment I could not save us. The strong one was down on the ground. The one who knew things could not so much as lift her own arm up off the floor. And so it all came down onto the shoulders of a 10-year-old boy. I learned the rest of it later, from Theo himself and from Rue. The fire was dying, and I was dying right along with it. And Rue, the broken stranger, the man with nothing left inside of him. Rue looked over at the open door and the storm beyond it, and the easy thing, which was to walk on out into the white and away from two more people the world was already taking back. And he did not walk away. He told me, a long time after, that when he saw that boy refuse to quit, refuse to cry, refuse to let his grandmother go without a fight, he saw his own little girl in him, the daughter he had lost. And something that had been stone dead inside that man for years and years just woke right back up. And together, the two of them, they kept me alive. Theo did every single thing I had taught him, every one in the right order, without me there beside him to say a word of it. He got me up off that cold killing ground and onto the bed of leaves, because the earth steals your heat faster than the air does. He banked the flat stones up close around the fire to throw the heat back into me, because the mountain wants to steal our fire. And Rue, he brought the wood in out of the storm. And between the two of them, they built that fire back up from almost nothing at all. And they held that warm cup to my lips. And they kept the storm out, and they kept the heat in, all through the longest, darkest night of all our lives. Because you decide what comes in, and you decide what stays out. My grandson saved my life that night, with the lessons I had spent 2 short days pouring into him, never once dreaming, either one of us, that he would need them so soon. When I finally came back to myself, gray and weak as water but alive, with the storm outside at last beginning to ease itself toward the dawn, Theo was sitting right there beside me, holding tight to my hand, and his father's letter was tucked down safe inside my coat, against my heart, right where my grandson had put it, to keep it close to me through the night. You stayed, I whispered over to Rue. He nodded. He could not speak for a moment, and then he said, somebody told me once, a fortress is the place where you learn to survive without the people who gave up on you. He looked into the fire. I figured Maybe it's also the place where you learn to stop being the kind of man who gives up on people. And far down the mountain, through the last of the dying wind, we all three heard a brand new sound, the low growl of an engine, climbing, coming up the mountain, toward us. They came at the first gray light of the dawn, 2 trucks, grinding their way up the old logging road as far as it would take them, and then men, on foot, the rest of the way up, through the new fallen snow, Carla, and her husband Dale, and there, coming up behind the both of them, in a heavy coat with a star pinned to the chest of it, the county sheriff, a graying, careful man by the name of Hargrove. And I want to tell you, my first thought, my poor, foolish, hopeful first thought, was that they had come all this way to tell me they were sorry, that the storm had frightened them in the night, that blood had finally won out over money, and they had climbed a mountain in the snow to bring us home. I am 70 years old, and still, even now, sometimes a fool for hope. That was not why they had come. There they are, Carla called out, and her voice was all wrong, too bright, too high, performing every word of it for the sheriff at her back. Oh, thank God, thank God. Mama Nell, what in the world were you thinking? Dragging that poor baby up a mountain in the middle of a blizzard? I got up onto my feet. Rue put a hand under my arm and helped me. I was weak as a newborn thing, but I would be damned to the pit before I would face that woman sitting down on the ground. You put us out, Carla, I said, and my voice was steady. You set our bags on your porch, and you locked your door behind us. Now, that is not how it happened, and you know it isn't, she said, smooth as lake ice. And she turned to the sheriff with the saddest, most worried face you ever saw a woman wear. She's not well, Sheriff. I told you. She hasn't been well for a long while now. She took that child right out of a warm bed in the middle of the night and dragged him up here, and now just look at where they are. This is exactly what I have been so afraid of. And right then, standing there in the cold, I finally understood why they had truly come. It was never to bring us home. It was the land. It had always, only, ever been about the land. And now they had found themselves a cleaner way to take it than ever getting my name on a paper. If they could only prove that I was unfit, a poor confused old woman who had dragged a helpless child up into the killing wilderness, then they could take Theo away from me, and whoever had the keeping of that boy would have the controlling of the boy's share in everything, including the very land that should, one day, by every right, be his. Dale took a step forward. He could not keep the satisfaction down out of his voice. We've already filed for emergency guardianship, he said, of the boy, on the grounds that you're not competent to care for him. There's a hearing set and everything. The sheriff here, he's just come along to make sure the child gets back down off this mountain safe. That is a lie, I said. I am as competent this morning as I have ever been in my life. You collapsed, Carla said. Soft now. And her eyes flicked just for an instant to my chest, to the way I was leaning my weight on Rue's arm. And a cold horror went through me, because I understood all at once that somehow, some way, they knew about my heart. You collapsed up here, Mama Nell, with a 10-year-old child depending on you for his very life. What if he had been all alone when it happened? What if you had died up here and left that baby all alone in a snowstorm? And here is the terrible part. She was almost right. I had collapsed. I did have a bad heart, and the plain, hard facts all lined up neat in her direction made a story with just enough truth wrapped around the lie of it to take my grandson away from me forever. And I felt it all start to slip. The land, the boy, everything I had left, all of it sliding away from me fast on the strength of a lie that had just enough truth in it to stand up. The sheriff shifted his weight. He looked uncomfortable down to his boots. Ma'am, he said to me, not unkind, I have to ask you straight. Is it true? Did you have some kind of a medical event up here on this mountain? And I could not lie to the man. I have never once in all my life been able to lie. Yes, I said, I did. And I saw the corner of Carla's mouth curl up. But, said a voice. A rough voice. A tired voice. A voice that had, somewhere in that long dark night, made up its mind to stop being tired. Rue stepped forward. But that there is not the whole story, he said, and I was here for every minute of it. The sheriff turned to look at him. And just who are you? A witness, Rue said. Name's Reuben Garrity. I've been sheltering down in the old mine through the worst of the cold, and I saw the whole thing, Sheriff, right from the start. He lifted his hand and he pointed it square at Carla and Dale. These two are lying to you, and I'll swear to it under any oath you care to put in front of me. That old woman did not drag this boy up here because she's confused. She saved his life. The both of them got put out into the snow with nothing but a backpack. I heard the boy say it himself plain as day that first night, heard him ask his grandmother if they were going to die out here. And when she took sick in that storm last night, you want to know what happened then? That boy saved her, 10 years old. He did every single thing right, everything she'd taught him, and he kept his grandmother alive till the dawn. Now, that is not a child in any danger. That is a child being raised right, by the one and only person in this whole sorry mess who actually loves him. And the silence that came down after that, well, it was something to stand in. Carla's bright, worried mask cracked clean across. He's a vagrant, she spat out, a drunk living in a hole in the ground. Who in the world is going to believe one word that... I'm a man who's got nothing left in this world to gain by lying, Rue said, quiet, which is a good deal more than I can say for the two of you. You want to stand here and talk about why you really climbed up a whole mountain at the crack of dawn, the morning after a blizzard? Was it the boy you were so worried sick about, or was it what's down underneath this mountain? And the sheriff, who was not, it turned out, a stupid man at all. He looked from Rue to Carla to Dale and to the desperate, flickering, cornered thing that had come up behind both their eyes. And then I played the last card that I had left in my hand. Sheriff, I said, come with me. There is something carved into this mountain that I believe you ought to see with your own eyes, and then you can tell me who you think this land belongs to. I led them into the tunnel, all of them, and I lifted up the torch, and I showed them the name, cut deep down into the living rock. Brennan. That is my family's name, I said, cut right there by my own great-great-grandfather. Before that town down the hill ever had a name to call itself, this is Brennan Land. It has been Brennan Land for better than 100 years. It came down clean and clear to me, and I have got the deed for it, signed and recorded, sitting in a box at the bank down in town. Carla and Dale here, they wanted me to sell it off to pay their debts, and I told them no. So they put the two of us out into the cold to break me. And when one cold night didn't break me, they came up here to take my grandson away, so they could finally get their hands on his share of it. I turned then, and I looked my cousin full in the face, there in the torchlight. That's the whole truth of it, Carla, and there is not one single word of it that I am afraid to stand up and say in any courthouse in this state. The sheriff stood and looked at that name in the stone for a long, long while, and then he turned slow to Dale. This emergency guardianship you filed, he said, these grounds you swore it out on, were any one of them based on what actually happened up here on this mountain, or just on whatever happened to suit the two of you? Dale opened up his mouth, and not one single thing came out of it. And that, right there, was the end of it. It did not all get tidied up in a single moment, mind you. Real life never does. There were weeks of it that came after, papers and a hearing in the county seat and a great deal of unpleasantness besides. But the sheriff filed his own report on what he'd found up that mountain. And Rue, he gave his sworn statement, and a doctor down in town looked me over good and put me on a little pill for my heart and pronounced me sound in the mind, if not so much in the body. The guardianship was thrown clean out. There was talk for a while of charges against Dale for swearing out a false filing, and in the end, the both of them left Cedar Hollow for good, owing money to half the county, and I have not laid eyes on either one of them since. The land stayed Brennan Land. It is Brennan Land to this very day. But that is not the part of this story I most want you to carry away with you tonight. The part I want you to keep is what happened after. in the spring, because we did not move away from that mountain. Where on earth would we have gone? That cold mountain was the only place in all the world that had ever once taken us in and kept us, so we stayed. The county helped me set the papers right and proper. And there was an old cabin down on the lower slope of the Brennan land, a place my grandfather had built up with his own 2 hands, a lifetime ago, half swallowed back up now by all the long years of weather and neglect. The roof of it sagged. The porch leaned hard to one side, but the frame underneath it all was still true. Still standing straight, it only needed people who were willing to stay. And the people of Cedar Hollow came. They did. The very same town I had been so sure had long forgotten my name. Old Opal Mercer, who'd run the feed store down on Main Street for 40-some years, she remembered my family. She remembered my mother. And she put the word out, up and down that one main street. And they came, men with their trucks and their tools, women with covered dishes and quilts, and 100 small, quiet kindnesses. They patched that sagging roof. They set that leaning porch back to rights. They brought that old dead cabin slowly back to life. And not a one of them, not a single one, would take one thin dime for the doing of it. Your people were good to mine. Once, long ago, Opal told me, when I tried, with a thick throat, to thank her for it. Up here in these mountains, honey, we don't forget a kindness. We just wait. We wait for our chance to pay it on back. And that right there is the thing that nobody ever tells you about losing every last thing you have, that sometimes it is the only way you will ever find out who was standing there the whole entire time, just waiting for their chance to love you. And Theo, my Theo, he grew that year. You could see it happening week to week. He started the fires now without anybody asking him to. He set his own snares, and he checked them at first light. He walked that mountain like he owned every rock and tree on it, which he did, which he will, and he laughed again. It took a good long while to come back, but it came back, and one day I heard it ring out across the yard, and I had to sit down on the porch step, because it was his father's laugh. Come back to me, out of his boy. And Rue stayed on with us. I gave the man some work to do, and then I gave him a room to sleep in. And somewhere along in there, I just plain stopped thinking of him as a stranger at all, and started thinking of him as ours. He doesn't touch the bottle anymore. He looks after the land, and the animals, and the boy. He's the one who keeps that cabin standing and the woodpile high, and Theo out of more trouble than a growing boy ought rightly to find. He found himself on our broken-down old mountain, the home he'd been so sure he had lost forever. Not the same one he'd lost. A brand new one. The only kind that ever really lasts. The kind you build with your own 2 hands. Because that, in the very end of it all, is the thing that I learned. What I had told my grandson that first freezing night, half believing it myself. I came, over that long year, to believe it all the way down to the ground I stood on. A home is not the place that keeps you only so long as you're useful and sets you out on the porch in the snow the minute you're not. A home is not the blood that only ever comes around when there's something left to take from you. That kind of a house. You are better off out in the cold and the clean snow than ever you were inside of it. A home is the people who choose you, the ones who climb the whole mountain in the dead cold of winter to come and stand by you, the ones who stay when every easy thing in the world is telling them to go, the ones who save your very life with their own 2 hands and never once think to ask you what's going to be in it for them. We started out with nothing but a crack in a freezing mountain and an old backpack between the 2 of us, and we built ourselves a fortress. And then, one warm hand at a time, we turned that fortress into a home. Just last evening, I sat out on the porch of that little cabin, with my grandson on the one side of me, and the fire going warm inside, and the whole green valley spread out gold and quiet below us in the last of the light. And Theo leaned his head over against my arm, the very same way he did on that first terrible night in the stone. And he said to me, "Soft, Grandma, we made it." And I thought about all of it, every step, the locked door and the click of it, the killing cold, the breathing dark of the mind. His father's last words folded up small against my heart, and I held my grandson in close against my side, there in the last gold of the evening light. Yes, I told him, after everything, after everyone, we finally made it home. So let me leave you with just this one thing, and then I'll let you go on to your evening. If you have ever in your life had a door close on you, locked and lightless by the very people who were supposed to love you, then I want you to hear an old woman tell you something true, that it is not the end of your story. No, it might just be the very beginning of finding out where it is you were always meant to belong and who it is that truly loves you. Because sometimes the family that throws you out into the cold was never really your family at all, and the family you were meant for. They're still out there, right now, waiting for you on a mountain you have not yet climbed. I would dearly love to know, before you go tonight, after a long life of finding these things out the hard way, what is it that matters more to you, the blood that you were born into, or the people who chose, with no reason on earth to love you anyway? Tell me, down in the comments. I'll be reading them, I promise you that. And if this story warms something in you tonight, then stay here, by our fire. We tell stories in this place about second chances and hard, long winters and the homes that we find waiting for us in the places we'd least ever think to look. There's another one coming soon, and I would be so glad, so very glad, to have you here beside me when it does. Good night now, and from our mountain to wherever it is that you are sitting tonight, you are not alone, and you were always loved.